Now, I wanted to make this video, and I think this is a very important video because most people, whenever they're breeding, they don't really know what to do before the eggs get here. Now, before you do anything, I always suggest before you even start breeding your animals, always have an incubator ready. That is the first thing you should always do. Not just have your incubator ready by saying, oh, I have an incubator. Turn it on, set up the heating, put on the thermostat, make sure that it's at the right temperature constantly. Don't just say, oh, well, I'll turn it on whenever the eggs get here. That doesn't work. You have to have it ready before the eggs get here. And now, depending on if you're breeding ball pythons and bearded dragons or whatever it is, it could be 2 weeks, it could be 8 months. Either way, you need to be prepared before the eggs get here. So with bearded dragons, I've had bearded dragons lay eggs as early as 2 weeks, as late as 6 weeks. I've had ball pythons lay eggs as early as 5 months, as late as 9 months after I start pairing them. And essentially what happens is, so let me give you an example. I don't know if you guys can see this one here. Let me make sure. So here's the first example. This female here, I started pairing her in November. So it was November 29th. This is dry erase, by the way. I can erase it once it's done, which I do because you probably can't see this one, but there's one right here where it had a bunch of dates, and I erased all that because she was done. She had already ovulated. She already had a prelay shed. So I erased all that because I didn't need to see it anymore. Now, this one I'm about to erase because if you can see over here, she had an ovulation shed. She had a prelay shed. Ovulation was 216, prelay shed was 308. I paired her in November 29th. So 4 months later, she's already had a prelay shed, right? That means 1 month out, usually it's about 4 weeks after they have their prelay shed, they're gonna have their eggs. So essentially this female's 5 months after starting to pair her, because essentially I started pairing her in December. So technically that's 1 month. And if we go, to the beginning of April, that's 4 months. So there you go. That one's 5 months. Now here's another one. Where are you at? Where are you at? Oh, here we go. This one. I started pairing. She was right next to me. She was right where I'm at. 10/19. I started pairing her. So October 19th. She had her ovulation 2/26. Actually, this was her ovulation shed. So she's currently still ovulating. She hasn't had a prelay shed yet. So essentially, if I started her in October, that is, well, mid-October. So that's about 2.5 months in 2023. And we're still looking at, what is it? We're already almost halfway through March. So we're looking at another, technically it's already been 6 months for her. She hasn't had her prelay shed yet. So I would assume that 2 months from now, she'll probably give us her eggs. So this one is going to be an 8-month process. So that's a huge difference there. And they were paired to the same male. So I started this girl before I even started this girl, but I'm going to have eggs from this girl before I even have eggs from this girl. And it's from the same male. So it's going to be a little wild. This year's already going to be wild. So based off ovulations, I'm not counting the females that have been locking or anything like that. Based off ovulations, I have 1, 2, where are we at? 3, 4, 5 females already ready to give us eggs. And now counting the ones that have been locking but have not had ovulation yet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 14. I just counted all of them. So it should be 14 clutches this year. Now, some of these have never locked yet. Like, this is what we're still waiting for. We have one up here that hasn't locked yet. We have this one that hasn't locked yet. So we have 4 so far with no locks. We have 5. No, this one reabsorbed, so this one no longer counts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 10 females that have not even locked yet. So we're still waiting for them to start locking. We're waiting for them to get to the point where they, feel like they need a lock. So we're waiting for the right time. We're waiting for those follicles to get up to size. So another 10 females that still haven't started locking. They may not even lock this year. That's all right. So out of all of these clutches that I'm talking about, I've already had three reabsorptions. So that's obviously a problem. We don't want to have those. But I think out of all of this, probably, what is that, 30 females, we probably had, 10% reabsorption. That's not a bad ratio. That's as of right now. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. But essentially, what are we talking about? We're talking about preparing for eggs. Now, I have two females that I've already had their pre-lay shed. They are due to lay eggs. They had their pre-lay shed on the exact same day. They're due to lay eggs. What are they? So here in about 2 weeks, they're due to lay eggs. I've already have my incubator set up. Everything's already in there. Vermiculite tubs I already have 9 tubs in there with vermiculite, and they already have thermometers inside. So I know, no, they have, yes, they have thermometers inside, Bluetooth thermometers inside that go to my phone that tell me what temperatures are in each of them. Now, the first thing I want to talk about, vermiculite. I got a whole bag of vermiculite. Now, this is what vermiculite looks like. It's almost like, it's squishy. It's little minerals. They're really good absorbent materials. So that's why we use them in incubation. Now, my job, my career, essentially, not essentially, it is my career, is I have to talk about vermiculite every so often. And that's because I'm in the, I don't know how to explain this, but my job essentially is making sure people ship out hazardous materials correctly and make sure they're storing hazardous materials correctly. So like the perfumes you get, the nail polish you get, the fireworks you get, the charcoal you get, all that stuff, I got to make sure people are doing that correctly. That's my entire career in a nutshell. Whenever we have liquid shipments, we use this stuff to make sure that if it does spill, it keeps things inside of the box. It sounds like a very boring job. It's not boring at all. It's just the way I explain it. It's hard to explain to somebody that doesn't know what it is. But we use this because of how good of an absorbent material it is. Not only is this a good absorbent material for incubation, but because of the absorption that it has in the water, it's also a good, I don't know how else how to say it, but it's a good thermal barrier. So essentially it keeps the heat very well. So the inside of the tub doesn't lose heat. And also, if the outside of the tub is extremely hot or extremely cold, the inside is going to maintain its temperature a lot better. So essentially, I always tell people, make sure you put the probe for your thermostat inside of the containers, because outside of the containers, temperatures fluctuate way too much. So you want to make sure you put the probe inside of the containers with the vermiculite that's already wet and everything. And typically what I do, so this is about a 32 ounce. Yeah, I think it's 32 ounces, maybe 16. I think this was actually 16 ounces. But this is a 16 ounce container, the same one that I use here for ball python water. So the same one that fits in there is the same one that I use for the vermiculite. Usually I do 3 of these, and one of them being water. Now, depending on, because there's different grades of vermiculite and everything, but depending on the vermiculite that you buy, you can probably do 3 of these and 1.5 water, 2.5 water. Now with ball pythons, it doesn't matter so much if you're putting egg crates on top of the vermiculite, because you want them to be moist, right? You want them to have humidity in there. But with bearded dragons, you're putting the eggs essentially right on top of the vermiculite. So you don't want them to be too wet. So what I do is I follow the same thing. You can do 3 or 2 or whatever. 3 vermiculite, 2 water, 1 water, whatever. And then after I put all that on top, I put a little bit of dry vermiculite, and then I set the eggs on top of there. It's just essentially to make sure that there is a dry barrier. Now, obviously that dry vermiculite is also going to absorb some of the liquids, but if it's not overly wet, the dry vermiculite is not going to absorb a whole lot of liquid. So essentially it's just going to be there holding the eggs in place. And then once I have the eggs in there, I add a little bit more on top and cover up about halfway to the eggs. That way they don't shift around while you're moving the containers and stuff like that. But that is the vermiculite. The next thing you want to make sure is you want to make sure you have enough food for when the babies are going to hatch. Every time, nope, For my species anyways, every time eggs are laid, it's usually about 2 months from then is when I'm going to have those babies. You want to have food ready. With ball pythons, it's pretty simple. You just want to make sure you have rodents ready for them to eat, whether they be frozen, whether they be live, whether they be mice, or whether they be rats. It's up to you. With bearded dragons, the problem is if you're doing crickets or if you're doing dubia roaches, you have to essentially buy them the same week you're expecting the babies, because crickets die almost instantly. I hate crickets. I can't stand crickets. Dubia roaches, they don't die, but they essentially grow. And by the time, if you don't buy them too soon, by the time your eggs hatch, those dubia roaches are going to be too big and you're going to have to buy different bugs again. So you usually honestly, you can honestly wait for the eggs to hatch for bearded dragons before you even buy the food, because sometimes the babies don't even eat for like 3 days or 4 days before after they hatch. So essentially, you'll be all right if you buy them as soon as they hatch, right? So that's really the preparation as far as food goes. Now, when we're talking about living quarters, enclosures, whatever it is, you got to make sure you have enough room for all the babies you're expecting. Now, I've already said I have 14 clutches that I'm expecting from ball pythons. And that's not considering the 10 that haven't locked, and that's already taken into out of the equation the 3 that are reabsorbed. So let's say with 14, I have 6 eggs every single clutch. That's really the average. It could be 3, it could be 9, you know, it could be more than 9. But essentially, you're going to have 6 eggs on average. If you have 6 eggs on average, and you're looking at 14 clutches, that puts you at about 84, I think 84 babies. As I'm showing you this, as I'm talking about it, I'm showing you the video of the rack that I have. This rack that I have has, the way I broke it up, it has room for 20 holdbacks and it has room for 50 babies. Yeah, so there's room for 70 brand new hatchlings. And then as they grow, I start putting them into the bigger tub. So usually after they are about 300 grams or so, I'll move them up to the next size. And I have about 18 of those tubs. So it's not a whole lot. So I do need another one of these racks, essentially, if I want to continue breeding as much as I want. But the way I do my sales and stuff, I usually don't have to, you know, go buy another rack, because by the time, you know, 71 snake the 71st snakes get here, the first one's gone. The second one's probably gone. Probably the first 10 are gone. So essentially, I have room for 10 more. So obviously, that's just going based off the average of 6 eggs per clutch. But you want to make sure you have enough space for the animals you're going to hatch. With bearded dragons, on the other hand, there's a lot more that goes into it. There's a lot because of the fact that on average, they lay 20 eggs, and that same female on average can lay 3 clutches. So essentially, that same female can give you 60 eggs. That's on average. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, but that's just one female. This year so far, I have had, I think at this point, I'm up to 8 clutches, and that's only been one female that's laid a second clutch. So this is 8 clutches and 7 females, right? So I'm still waiting on the 7 females to lay a second clutch, essentially. So I could potentially have, if all 7 females lay 3 clutches, and it's about 20, it's 140, so 280. So that's about 420 babies. Do I have enough room for 420 babies? That's a very good question. I have a rack that can hold about 170 or 160 babies. No, it's 170 babies at a time. The way I do my scheduling, and if you haven't watched my scheduling videos on Patreon or YouTube members, I actually, you know, I gave out a bunch of YouTube memberships. It's random, so I apologize if you feel like you were left out. Every month, I'm allowed to give up to 10 YouTube memberships. And that's really random. YouTube selects out of all of my subscribers who gets a membership. So if you got one, congratulations. If you didn't get one, I apologize. Maybe you'll get lucky the next month. But essentially, I just do it whenever I feel like it. So what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to do it at the end of the month. So it's almost like a congratulations, you won. But it's really random. So I apologize if you feel like you were left out. But it's 10 every single month. I think it's every single month. Maybe it's like every other month or something like that. I'll have to look more into it. But essentially, that it said, hey, you can give out 10 memberships every so often, whatever. But there's going to be a video, or there was a video on scheduling on how I schedule my bearded dragon clutches so I don't end up overwhelmed with 420 babies at once, right? So watch that video. I'm also in the process, actually, I just recorded the video at the same time as this. I was wearing the same clothes and everything, but I'm in the process of editing the video for showing off how I put together that rack. And essentially that's what you're gonna see if you are a member. So if you got it for free, congratulations. But it's just YouTube memberships. It's not really much perks in there. But if you see it on Patreon, you obviously know you got more perks over there. But that's awesome. So the next thing is, so we talked about feeding. We talked about having space for it. The next thing is really just selling it. How are you going to sell everything? Now, there's different ways you can sell everything. There's websites. There's reptile expos. There's Facebook groups that you can go on there and say you're rehoming them, which is the way you're supposed to do it. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I feel like Facebook has priorities messed up. They will damn near suspend somebody for trying to sell an animal on Facebook, but there's all these people scamming and doing everything, and they get their accounts back. They actually never lose their accounts. So what the heck, Facebook? But whatever. I can't do anything about it. I don't run Meta. My name ain't Mark Zuckerberg, and I don't have billions of dollars. So all I can do is talk. That's all I got to say. But yeah, make sure you're marketing yourself. Make sure you are. I'll actually be doing a video about marketing on my Patreon as well. And the YouTube members will get the same video. But I want to kind of talk about marketing, talk about setting up a website, talk about setting up a page for yourself, because that's really important if you are planning on breeding. Is making sure you are marketing to the right people, and not just marketing to people in your area. Maybe you want to be a small scale breeder and you only want to sell to about 15 people a year. If that's what you want to do, that's fine, do that. But that's not what most people want to do. Most people want to sell across the entire globe, right? So you want to be a household name as far as reptiles go. But essentially that's what you want to happen. And so I will be making that video too. And hopefully you enjoyed this video. You got to make sure you market yourself. You got to make sure you have all the food you need, all the space you have for, you got to make sure you have all the space you need for the animals you're about to have. And you got to make sure you're preparing yourself, preparing the egg boxes, preparing your incubator, prepare all of that before the eggs get here, and think about everything else you need before the eggs get here too, because you want to be prepared. You want to make sure you know where you're going to get your bugs or your rodents from. You want to make sure you start setting up that a snake rack for your babies, or you want to make sure you set up a rack for your bearded dragons, whatever it is. You want to make sure you set that up beforehand. And essentially that's the entire video. So if you made it this far into the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything that I put out in the future. As always, peace.